To discuss Brazil and the impact of this very important vote is Euan Marshall, the editor of the Brazilian Report. Thank you so much for joining us on this momentous day.
Hi, good evening. Yeah, as Paul just said, the results have just been called in the last maybe 4 or 5 minutes. We've been hearing, screams, fireworks, shouting, all that sort of thing. So it really is quite a momentous moment for Brazil, it seems.
Euan, I want to get your reaction to these results. Is this what we expected? It certainly was a tight race, but were we expecting Da Silva to come out on top here?
I think on the whole, we were expecting Lula to win the election. He's been the favourite throughout, but just how tight this margin is, as mentioned there, it's going to be about 51 to 49. That's a tiny margin. It's the tightest in Brazilian democratic history. Polls were suggesting that maybe Lula would be around 52, 53%, some even suggesting 54%. Which even in itself would be tight, but this is, really right down to the wire. And, that brings questions of, what happens next? Because Bolsonaro, with such a tight margin, will be well within his right to appeal. But, that's what we're going to have to wait and see.
Paulo, our reporter, just mentioned about the divisiveness in the country leading up to this election. There were a lot of incidents of violence, and the rhetoric has been particularly ugly. Can you talk about how this election has compared to other elections in terms of the vitriol?
Well, it's been a continuation, I think, of an existing trend in Brazil, which has accompanied Jair Bolsonaro's ascension to power. This generally kind of the us versus them rhetoric with a lot more violence involved. Paulo mentioned one situation there, and just to kind of go a little deeper into that, this was yesterday. One of the best voted federal deputies in Brazil, a pro-Bolsonaro lawmaker, she was caught on camera brandishing a gun at a black Lula voter in a highly wealthy neighborhood in São Paulo. Like pursuing him down the street. It was, just insane scenes that we wouldn't have seen, maybe 4 years ago or 8 years ago. And so the question now is that Jair Bolsonaro's government has not only mobilized this group of people, but it's also increased the amount of firearms that they have access to, because a big part of his government has been to loosen these regulations on owning guns and being able to carry guns. So, maybe we're going to see now a bit more tension and potentially more violence in the months that come.
If Lula is declared the official winner, what is the significance of his victory? I mean, what will this mean for Brazil? He's such a different candidate from the Bolsonaro tenure.
Yeah, and just to point out, he has now been declared the official winner. The electoral courts of Brazil have announced that Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva will be the next president of Brazil. And yeah, it's fascinating because it's quite a remarkable turnaround for someone who, until very recently, was in jail on corruption and money laundering charges, which were since quashed because the Supreme Court found that these convictions were politically motivated. But I think what Lula has sought to do throughout this campaign is just remind people of what his time was like as president, because he was president between 2003 and 2010. He left office as the most popular Brazilian president in democratic history. And he's just been trying to kind of bring back that nostalgia of, you remember back when I was president, you used to be able to buy steak, you used to be able to buy beer, you used to have, you used to hang out with your friends. He's been trying to kind of bring that in, and that's what people want at the moment, because Brazil has been really through the ringer with the COVID pandemic and the spiraling inflation that came after it. So Brazil just wants a little bit of, celebration, I think.
It will be interesting how this all plays out. Euan Marshall, editor of the Brazilian Report, thank you so much for your insight today.
Thank you.
Well, still ahead, an update.